Good morning, sir. Can you see and hear us?
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you. May I call Rodric Williams, please?
Yes, of course.
Repeat after me. I swear by Almighty God
I swear by Almighty God
that the evidence I shall give
that the evidence I shall give
shall be the truth,
shall be the truth,
the whole truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the truth.
and nothing but the truth.
Thank you. Please sit down.
Good morning, Mr. Williams. As you know, my name is Jason Beer, and I ask questions on behalf of the inquiry. Can you give us your full name, please?
It's Rodric David Allen Williams.
Thank you very much for coming to give evidence to the inquiry today and for previously providing us with a very detailed witness statement. Can we look at that witness statement, please? It's WITN 0482, so 0842 0100. There's a hard copy in front of you. It's 131 pages long, excluding the exhibit sheet, and is dated the 11th of March 2024. If you can turn, please, to the last page, 131. Is that your signature?
Yes, it is.
Thank you. I think there are some corrections that you wish to make. Can we deal with those in turn, please?
Thank you.
Page 36, please. In page 18, paragraph 36.
Yes.
At the top of page 18, the sentence, when I forwarded the email to John Scott and Rob King on the 22nd of May 2014, should that read 2013?
Yes, that's correct.
So cross out 14, write 13.
Correct. Thank you.
Secondly, paragraph 41 on page 21. In the second line, you say, I have no recollection of this email or the matter to which it relates, but indicates that the basis for seeking recovery was that the amount alleged to have been gained was the proceeds of. Do you want to cross out the words have been gained was the proceeds of crime and instead insert the words be owing was connected to a criminal conviction?
Yes, please.
So cross out the words have been gained was the proceeds of crime and insert be owing was connected to a criminal activity.
Thank you.
Page 54, please. In paragraph 106 at the top of page 54. And the second line, amount to an audit of the audit processes used rather than a review of the assurance work itself. Would you wish to cross out the words work itself and instead insert the word environment?
Yes, please.
And then lastly, page 97. And paragraph 195. Which is at the top half of the page. 6 lines in. Sorry, 5 lines in. The line beginning, their client for the purpose of giving or receiving legal advice. Do you wish to insert the word dominant before the word purpose?
Yes, it's line 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 7. It to insert
7.
dominant on the...
So can you read the whole sentence that you wish to change?
The same applies to communications between a lawyer and their client or a third party for the insert dominant
Oh, okay. It's that
purpose.
It's that purpose, not the earlier one that I identified.
Thank you.
So insert the word dominant before purpose.
Thank you.
With those 4 corrections in mind, there are some minor typographical errors that I'm not going to go through and correct. There's quite a few of those, but I'm not going to correct them. With those 4 substantive corrections in mind, are the contents of the witness statement true to the best of your knowledge and belief?
They are.
Thank you very much. That witness statement can come down. As I've said, the witness statement is very detailed, and you've obviously devoted a substantial period of time to the making of it by setting out the relevant events in largely chronological order and adding your recollections where you have them. I'm accordingly not going to ask you detailed questions about every aspect of the witness statement, but instead take you to some of the more significant events over the past 12, 13 years or so. Can I start with your background, please? You joined the Post Office in August 2012, is that right?
Yes, it's late August.
And you remain an employee of the Post Office?
Yes.
And specifically, you are the head of legal in the Post Office's remediation unit?
I'm a head of legal in the remediation unit, yes.
Oh, there's more than one head of legal? Okay.
Yes.
How many heads of legal are there in the remediation unit?
At the moment, I think there may be another 2, or possibly 3. I'm not sure, I'm sorry.
Okay, so you're one of the heads of legal within the remediation unit, is that right?
Correct.
And I think you've held that role in the remediation unit since August 2020.
Yes.
The Post Office's website suggests that the remediation unit has 3 main functions: compensation and redress for sub-postmasters, administering matters related to the appeals of historic criminal convictions, and the provision of full assistance to this inquiry. Is that a fair summary of what it does?
I had thought the inquiry was separate, but it seems correct, yes.
If you felt that it was separate, I mean, you work in it, is it separate or not?
I don't deal with the inquiry team, so I thought it was separate.
Right. So do you deal with compensation and redress?
I have done previously, yes.
And do you deal with matters relating to the appeals of historic convictions?
I have assisted the company with that, yes.
I'm sorry, I missed you there.
I'm sorry, I have assisted the company with that, yes.
Does it follow that, notwithstanding your personal role in the events which have happened since August 2012, you hold a senior position in the unit concerned with the provision of redress to sub-postmasters?
Yes.
And with the administration of issues relating to the appeals against their convictions?
Yes.
In terms of your qualifications, I think you were admitted as a solicitor and a barrister in New Zealand in 1995.
Correct.
And you worked in that country on civil matters until 1998.
Yes.
From 1999, you worked in civil litigation practice in the United Kingdom, and you were then admitted as a solicitor of England and Wales in 2002, is that right?
Yes.
You worked in New York between 2003 and 6, when you then returned to the UK again to work in civil litigation matters.
Yes, I came back from New York at the end of 2005.
Overall, do you accept, therefore, that you had considerable and wide-ranging experience as a civil litigator in private practice prior to joining the Post Office?
Yes.
Do you accept that since joining the Post Office, you remained bound at all times by the SRA's Code of Conduct?
I do.
If we turn up, please, on the screen, page 11 of your witness statement and paragraph 22. Page 11, paragraph 22. you say in the first sentence you'd often been asked to distill or synthesize information provided from various parts of the business for other audiences within the business, particularly if the information concerns legal issues with which I have some familiarity. And then at the end of the paragraph, you say, I generally rely on others for the accuracy of the content, especially if it concerns areas outside my expertise, with my role being to, quote, sense check it. Yes?
Yes.
That might be interpreted as meaning that your role was limited to one of gathering pieces of paper written by other people together, like a cataloguer of information. Is that what you were trying to say?
Yes.
It might be interpreted as meaning that your role was limited to summarising the legal advice of others. Is that what you were trying to say?
No, not necessarily. It would depend on the task at hand.
And so over the decade period that we're talking about, sometimes you provided legal advice of your own.
Yeah, I would think that was right, yes.
You didn't simply distill or synthesise the legal advice of others.
Not exclusively, but I would have said predominantly with the matters we're concerned with here.
You mainly summarise other people's legal advice in that 10-year period, is that right?
No, I think that's an oversimplification.
You tell us then.
I'm sorry, what would you...
Yes,
I'm struggling to understand, I'm sorry.
Yes, it's entirely my fault. What was your role, looking at it as a whole, in the provision of legal advice to the Post Office concerning the Horizon system and matters that concerned it? Did you mainly summarise other people's legal advice and sense check it?
No,
or did you provide legal advice of your own?
It would literally depend. It's a very broad subject over a long period of time. My primary role was to ensure that the company was receiving the advice it needed. That might have come from a variety of sources. It may have been something I could contribute to. But the concern was the delivery to Post Office so that it could act as it saw fit or as it saw it needed to.
So it's neither one thing nor the other, it's both, depending on the context.
Quite possibly, and possibly at the same time. It may be that I could contribute in addition to formal advice received, but...
In terms of the period before you moved to the remediation unit, so from the time when you joined the Post Office in August 2012 until I think August 2020, that's 10-year period. What was your job title?
I think it changed halfway through. I was hired as, quote, litigation lawyer, I think was the title. And then I became head of legal, brackets, dispute resolution and brand.
And when was that, please?
I think that was in 2017. It's in my statement.
So, sorry, that can come down the statement that's on the screen, thank you. Before you became head of legal in 2017, to whom did you report?
I reported initially, before I became head of legal, yes, I reported to a head of legal.
And who was that?
For a period, I'm sorry, I can't remember the dates. It was to Hugh Flemington for a period, and then a colleague called Jessica Madron.
And after you became head of legal, to whom did you report?
I reported to the legal director. It was Ben Fote.
And has that been for the entirety of the period from 17 until today?
No, not until today, no. It was until I moved to the remediation unit.
Okay. Between August 2012 and moving to the remediation unit, did you become aware of the very high number of prosecutions that had been, and when you joined, were still being brought against sub-postmasters by the Post Office?
I'm sorry, what was the date range again, please?
August 2012,
Until
you moved to the remediation unit.
I became aware, yes.
When did you become aware of the numbers of prosecutions?
I couldn't tell you.
When you joined, were you aware that the Post Office was a prosecuting authority?
I don't know that. I became aware shortly after I joined that there was prosecution activity, yes. I don't know about the Post Office being a prosecuting authority, though. I'm not sure about that.
I think you're probably now aware that between 2000 and 2015, the Post Office bought some 850 prosecutions, resulting in over 700 convictions.
I am aware of that, yes.
Are you now aware that between April 2013 and June 2018, over 600 sub-postmasters were suspended?
No, I wasn't aware of that figure.
Did you have any role in that period, so that's 13 to 18, in giving advice over the suspension of sub-postmasters?
I think it's likely that I did, yes.
So you were aware that although in late 2013, early 2014, prosecutorial activity ceased, the Post Office carried on suspending sub-postmasters?
Yes.
And what was your role in the suspension of sub-postmasters?
I would so the part of the business that would be responsible for that was a group of people called contract advisors, and that team would contact me as a member of the Post Office legal team from time to time and ask me for my advice, my support, my input into a case they may be looking at.
And so was that whether there were sufficient grounds to suspend?
For the most part, that was their decision, but they might discuss a particular case to see what I thought whether there were. Yes, I think yes is the answer. I'm sorry, yes.
And so when you were giving this advice, although the prosecution activity had stopped, but the suspension activity continued, looking at the matter generally, did you bring into account any knowledge you had? And I think we're going to hear in due course it was an unfolding knowledge, a developing knowledge of bugs, errors and defects in Horizon.
Not that I specifically recall, no.
Do you know whether corporately the Post Office brought any developing knowledge that it had into account in that period? I.e., we've stopped prosecuting people. Mm-hmm. We're carrying on suspending people. Mm-hmm. We may be relying on Horizon data in order to suspend people. Should we be doing so?
I'm not aware of that, no.
You make a point in your witness statement on a number of occasions that you were not and are not experienced in matters of criminal law. Is that right?
I would describe myself as not a criminal lawyer.
When you were giving advice to senior executives and others in the Post Office, did you make that explicitly clear to them?
I may not have done.
And why would that be?
Certainly when I joined, there was a specialist criminal lawyer. I had been...
Was that John L. Singh?
Yes, that's correct. I had been hired to attend to civil matters, and I certainly to most of my colleagues, it would be well known that I wasn't a criminal lawyer and had no background or experience in criminal law matters.
And when you say colleagues, do you mean legal colleagues?
As my first, yes, I did mean that.
I'm thinking about your clients in inverted commas, even though you're an in-house lawyer. To what extent did you make clear to, let's restrict it at the moment, to senior executives to whom you were giving advice, that you were not a criminal lawyer, or you were not, using my formulation, experienced in relation to matters of criminal law?
I don't recall expressly putting that disclaimer on things.
You mentioned Mr. Singh, so by the time you joined in August 2012, I think he was the head of criminal law in the post office, is that right?
I think he was our only in-house criminal lawyer.
Yes, and I think he was described as the head of criminal law, even though he was the only one.
I don't recall him being described that, but...
Did you share offices with him?
Yeah, we had an open plan office, so yes, we shared that space.
He's given evidence before the inquiry and is due to come back. He's made a number of statements in emails and in correspondence which might reasonably be described as demonstrating disdain for sub-postmasters. Was that an attitude of mind which you observed in him at the time?
No, I wouldn't have said that, no.
Did you instead form the view that he treated sub-postmasters and the issues that they were raising with fairness and equanimity?
I don't believe I could comment on that. I wasn't close enough to his work. And certainly didn't observe much interaction between him and postmasters at all.
Yes, I'm not talking about direct interaction. It would have been in what he wrote and in what he said in the office.
No, I don't recall that, no.
So if thinking back, you formed an impression of him, you would have thought he would have treated postmasters fairly, would you?
Again, it's not something that had crossed my mind, so I'm hesitating. If I could phrase it as a negative, I wouldn't have thought he treated them unfairly. I'm sorry, I'm just literally trying to cast my mind back to our interaction in the office there, and it's what you're describing isn't something I observed, so it's hard for me to make a positive statement. I'm sorry.
How about this then? A conclusion that may be open to the chairman at the end of the inquiry, when he's heard all of the evidence, is that Mr. Singh had a defective understanding of the code for Crown prosecutors, a defective understanding of his disclosure obligations and the post office's obligations, and the duties of candour that a prosecutor owes in criminal proceedings. Over your years of dealing with him, did you have any concerns about Mr. Singh's competence and suitability for the role of head of criminal law at the post office?
So it's quite a long question and a bit in there.
I'll break it down.
Yeah, I think I understand it. I'm sorry. I don't think I'm competent to describe. I said I'm not a criminal lawyer. I don't know the extent to which he was acting compliantly with the prosecutor's code of conduct, for instance. I'm just not able to do that.
So your lack of experience in criminal law wouldn't have allowed you to form a view over his competence and suitability to perform the function he was performing, is that right?
I do not believe I'm competent to do that, no.
More generally, what can you tell the chairman about attitudes within the post office's legal team to sub-postmasters who sought to defend themselves against allegations that they'd stolen money or were guilty of false accounting, but who themselves alleged that the shortfalls were due to Horizon? What was the general feeling, if there was one?
I don't think there was a general feeling. I think it's. I'm sorry, I'm really struggling with this because I'm trying to picture the work environment, which is where I feel you're taking me, and it's. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. I don't think.
I am asking you about the working environment. I'm asking you about a 10-year period, and I'm asking, was there any attitude of mind towards sub-postmasters?
I wouldn't have thought so, no. There was a lot of discussion at the corporate communication level about postmasters being the heart of the company, and clearly an essential component of the business, the client, the customer-facing part of it.
And did that trickle down into the legal team?
Well, it would certainly trickle down to me. I can't speak for the entire legal team.
They're a commodity that needed to be cherished.
I wouldn't have described them as a commodity, but the cherished bit, I think, was important.
They're individuals, men and women, who needed to be cherished
yes,
and treated with fairness at all times.
Yes, they're an important part of the business, yes.
Would that
Very
be,
important.
Would that be the esprit de corps of the legal team?
I wouldn't have necessarily said that, because the legal team were doing lots of different things in different spaces. There are parts of the legal team that have very minimal contact with the postmaster community, for instance.
And again, I'm not talking about direct contact with them. I'm talking about in the way that we deal as a legal team with the complaints and concerns that they are raising, the sub-postmaster community. How, as a legal team, do we respond to them? Give us an insight, please, into the feeling within the office.
I would have thought neutrally. What we should be doing is that no presumption either way. What is the case? What is happening here? What is going on in this particular branch? I would have said that. I would hope that was the attitude.
So no predetermined mindset, a position of strict neutrality between the sub-postmasters on the one hand and the post office on the other.
I think I can only speak for myself with that, but that's something I would hope I had done.
Before we get into the dozen or so specific topics that I need to address with you, can we take a step back and look at the written evidence you've given to the inquiry and then some of your conduct at the time? In terms of the written evidence you've given to the inquiry, would this be a fair summary? In your witness statement, firstly, you do not accept that you did anything wrong.
Have I said that?
No, a summary means that you don't read out each word or don't read out the specific words, you summarise. And I'm asking, over 100 pages, you don't say anywhere that you did anything wrong.
I think I have said I did something wrong.
What was the thing you did wrong?
Well, I'm sure I've done others as well. Over 10 years, I don't think I could have batted perfectly. And I wouldn't want anybody to have the impression that I think that. Things have gone wrong, and that's why I'm here.
What's the thing that you think in the witness statement?
Certainly in the witness statement, I missed a reference to the possibility for remote access.
In the Deloitte report?
In an early Deloitte report,
okay,
yes.
So you inadvertently missed a sentence or a paragraph within a Deloitte report.
Correct.
Which spoke about remote access in 2014.
Yes.
I think that's the only thing. I didn't read that as you saying you did anything wrong, because it was an inadvertent slip.
I'm sorry. Wrong is a very broad word encompass. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Could you be a bit more specific? I'm
yes.
sorry. I'm sure I've done things wrong, but it would be helpful to have an understanding of when or what it might have been.
Well, let's look at it this way. In your witness statement, you either state or give the impression that you acted appropriately and in accordance with your professional duties at all times. Correct?
That was certainly my intent and my endeavour.
I don't think you identify that any other person did anything wrong.
I don't believe that's my role to judge.
Well, it's not necessarily judging, is it? It's maybe talking about the conduct of others without passing judgment on them. But it's right, isn't it? In your 137 pages, you don't identify that anyone else did anything wrong, other than inadvertently missing the sentence in the Deloitte report.
No, I don't believe I have done that in my witness statement. No, I don't believe I have.
And you don't offer any apology to sub-postmasters in your witness statement, do you?
I've certainly tried to in the first paragraph.
Well, let's look
third paragraph.
Let's look at the attempt. Then, is it paragraph 3 on page 2?
Yes.
Let's just read that to ourselves. Was that the attempt at the apology you were referring to?
Yes.
Will you offer deep regret at harm caused by events rather than harm being caused to sub-postmasters by people, or harm being caused to sub-postmasters by people in the post office, or even harm being caused to them by the post office? You offer regret that events cause people harm, don't you? Not people cause them harm. Is that as far as you were prepared to go?
No, it was my attempt to summarise what is quite a large undertaking in
Yeah, you probably thought about this carefully, this paragraph, didn't you?
I hope so. Yes. I thought carefully about I hope I thought carefully about all of my statement. But yes, it's important. I believe it's why we're here.
And that's as far as you're prepared to go. Express regret that events cause people harm.
I will go as far as say, if I have caused somebody harm, I'm deeply sorry. That's not why I.
But again, you haven't identified in your statement that you have caused anyone harm or done anything wrong, have you?
No.
You don't identify any reflections or things that ought to have been done differently, do you?
I tried to respond to the Rule 9 request I had.
Yeah.
Sorry, I wasn't.
We ask people whether they have any other reflections they wish to give.
I conclude with a reflection.
Let's look at that. Paragraph 255 on page 131. This is the part of the statement where people address the inquiry's question, have you any other reflections or things that you wish to say? An open question. And you say you regret the various processes intended to resolve postmasters' civil law-based complaints have not achieved that resolution, and you hope it happens soon. Is that your only reflection?
Actually, I think it's an important one because it's not the only one. I think there is another. But this has gone on a long time, and certainly I can only speak for me, but I would never have wanted this to have lasted this long for anybody involved. I think at the beginning, so back at paragraph 3, I do say I hope this process helps people find closure, and I must say I hope for myself personally too.
Well, thank you for that. Can we take that down from the screen and examine a miscellany of issues before we look at the substance of some points to try and see whether they assist us in determining the nature of your role in all of this? Can I start, please, with your role in the development, pursuit, and management of a narrative in the media by the Post Office? Can we look, please, at paragraph 169 of your witness statement on page 84?
Yes.
Page 84, foot of the page, para 169. Under a heading, engagement with the media, and you say the Post Office's communications team was responsible for its engagement with the media. I was typically the contact for comms within Post Office's in-house legal team if they felt they needed legal support, which could range from ad hoc reviews of statements they were proposing to make to legal advice in respect of proposed broadcasts. I would arrange external legal support where that was required, usually from Cameron McKenna, who I had been introduced to shortly after joining Post Office. My role as an in-house lawyer was one of legal risk manager, and this was my focus in the Post Office's engagement with the media. Thank you, that can come down. So would it be right to describe you essentially as the point man for media relations in the Post Office's legal team?
I think that's fair, yes.
And there was extensive involvement by you and other lawyers in the Post Office's media relations, wasn't there?
On some of these matters, yes.
Can we turn to paragraph 175 on page 86? Sorry, page 88. You set out your understanding of the Post Office's, quote, general attitude and strategy at that time towards the media and its aims in dealing with them. Was that the media could and would report on the Post Office. It was therefore important to maintain an open dialogue with journalists so as to get an insight into what they might say and try to ensure they reflected the Post Office's position, with matters only being escalated to formal legal intervention if it was felt essential to ensure a balanced presentation of the Post Office's position in the finished publication. Would you agree that that paints a benign or neutral picture of the Post Office strategy in relation to media relations?
I can't comment on what it portrays. I would not have described Post Office as necessarily benign with its media-facing public image.
How would you paint or describe Post Office's media strategy so far as concerns Horizon?
I wasn't responsible for setting strategy, so I would have taken instructions from the communications director.
What was your understanding of it?
I think it's, particularly with the Horizon matters, Post Office felt it had its side of the story to tell. I think there's a feeling that people weren't interested in hearing it or engaging with it, probably is a better example, a better word.
And so what was its strategy?
I don't know. That would have come from the communications director.
You were engaged in that strategy yourself, and you had no understanding of what it was. Is that right?
I supported it. Strategy comes from the internal clients, and the legal team would help give effect to it.
Did they tell you what the strategy was?
I'm not aware of it. Like, if you think that we have strategy documents and clear objectives on some matters, I don't think I saw something quite like that for these matters.
Never mind a written document, an understanding of what the Post Office's media strategy was. If you were giving effect to it, how would you know what it was?
Well, I was giving effect to the instructions on a particular matter. I wasn't responsible for setting media strategy.
I haven't asked you whether you were responsible for setting a media strategy. That's a different question.
I'm sorry.
I'm asking what your understanding was of the Post Office's media strategy so far as concerned Horizon.
I can't tell you because I'm not aware of one. What I did do is help Post Office respond to certain media inquiry activities. The most, I guess, prominent of that being the Panorama program. I helped assist that. Where that sat in Post Office's strategy, which may have issues of brand positioning, etc., behind it, I'm not sure.
Okay.
I can't speak to that. I'm sorry.
And so, what was its strategy?
I can't speak to that. I'm sorry.
Okay. if you didn't have an understanding of what Post Office's general attitude and strategy towards the media was so far as concerned Horizon, can we look at some examples of how you approach the media in practice? And I stress these are only examples. Time doesn't permit me to go through all material. Can we start, please?
So just before we do, I'm sorry if I can. I'm struggling with these questions a little bit. Can I understand what you mean by strategy? Because I'm worried we have a disconnect, and I do want to answer the questions properly.
I haven't got my dictionary with me at the moment, Mr. Williams, but I would understand, and I intend by my questions, the word strategy to mean as follows: a pre-designed plan that has aims and objectives. I'm making this up on the hoof. That has aims and objectives. That's a strategy in my mind. Does that help you?
Yeah, it does. Thank you. And I'm sorry.
Well, it's just you use the word here.
Yeah,
see.
I appreciate it. I'm sorry. I'm sorry if that's my poor use. I just want to understand, because I'm sorry, I'm interrupting your question, please.
See, should paragraph 175 read, I did not have an understanding of the Post Office's strategy towards the media?
Following this discussion, I think it may have read better. My understanding of Post Office's general approach at that time to the media would have been, and I apologise if I'm sort of getting into sophistry or anything like that, but the pre-designed plan, I would have accepted if we'd had something like that, to have had that articulated or presented to me or made clear to me. And I don't recall having that, and that's why I've been struggling. I'm sorry.
Let's look at some examples then, rather than engage in sophistry. Poll 00101923.
While that's coming up, Mr. Williams, can I just be clear? Was this point man, to use the expression, role, something that you assumed more or less as soon as you joined the Post Office, or was it later in time than that?
Thank you, Simon. It was pretty much at the beginning. I helped with something unrelated, probably certainly within the first 6 months of my time.
Fine, and so you if I can put it in this way, that part of your work was something that began shortly after you started and continued right through the period that Mr. Beer has identified.
That's correct, sir.
Fine, thanks.
Can we start, please, by looking at page 3 of this document?
I'm sorry, I recognise this one as quite a long email train. Could I have a bundle reference, please?
E51.
E51. Thank you. Thank you.
If we look at the foot of page 3, we can see an email from Nick Wallace, the journalist, dated the 16th of December 2014.
Yes.
To Mark Davis. He was essentially in charge of Post Office's media and communications, is that right?
Yes.
And Mr. Wallace says, "Hi, Mark, I wonder if your colleagues could help me with a few queries." And then he starts setting them out, yes? And this was, I think you'll recall, in the run-up to the One Show broadcast.
Yes.
Thank you. And then if we go up the page, you'll see Mr. Davis passes it to a wider group of people, including you. Hi, another email from the BBC, now raising a series of new questions. Yes? And then if we go to the foot of page 2, we can see you replied, 16th of December, 2:16, Rodric Williams wrote, and then if we go to the top of page 3, you say, "Without having read them closely, only that this is getting ridiculous. We're being asked to address an ever-expanding range of serious issues on a piecemeal basis with constantly shifting goals in an attempt to get Nick Wallace a story which is, quote, news. On the upside, they suggest we're starting to land our points. This line of inquiry is focused on the user-friendliness of Horizon, not on the accuracy of what it records or what we do with that information. I'll revert on the substance shortly. And then if we go, please, to page 1, at the foot of the page, your further reply to the same group of people, again on the 16th of December at just after 4 o'clock, so it's about an hour and a half after your immediate reaction. And you reply to your colleagues in detail on what's said, if we scroll down. And you say, hi, my substantive responses to Nick Wallace's latest questions are embedded in red. And you essentially go through Mr. Wallace's email and write red paragraphs or text in red against what he has said. Okay?
Correct.
If we go back to his email there, they don't show up in red, but I can tell you which ones they are because I've compared the text next to the original of Mr. Wallace's email. If we scroll back to page 3, please. At the foot of the page. So what Mr. Wallace wrote was, hi Mark, I wonder if you or your colleagues could help me with a few queries. When was the last time the Post Office did any research into how satisfied or otherwise sub-postmasters are with the Horizon system? It would be very helpful to know the scope of that research and its results. And then you wrote, Post Office constantly receives feedback on Horizon from its tens of thousands of users through a variety of sources. And then over the page, the primary sources are the MBSC, Horizon Service Desk, Branch User Forum, and NFSP. Feedback is also delivered through a variety of business as usual processes. Next paragraph, that feedback is then implemented through regular reviews and upgrades. Ultimately, though, any feedback has to be considered in the context of the entire user base. We wouldn't roll out a likely costly system change because a few agents asked for it. No business would. And then you wrote this. We don't need to do research on Horizon. It's the system we provide to our agents and require them to use. If agents don't like it, they can choose not to provide services for us. The vast majority of our agents and other users work with it just fine, and we're not required to bespoke our point-of-sale accounting system to the whims of each individual agent. In relation to your reply, we don't need to do research on Horizon. It's the system we provide to our agents and require them to use. If they don't like it, they can choose not to provide services for us. Was that your view? Sub-postmasters could either use Horizon or leave?
Yes. Because
Like it or lump it?
no, not necessarily, but it is the system that is used across many thousands of branches and I think tens of thousands of terminals. That is the system that Post Office provided.
Well, it's obvious it's the system that the Post Office provided. That's just stating a fact. What you've done is gone further. You said we don't need to research Horizon. They can either use it or go away.
But I was commenting immediately above. It makes it quite clear we do actually receive feedback. I think this is market research on users that's it's just saying we don't need to. I don't believe there's an obligation, and I'm speaking as a lawyer, I don't think there's an obligation on Post Office to do that.
But was this part of your thinking in your time in this decade? If sub-postmasters don't like Horizon, They can just down tools and leave. That's their remedy.
Well, I don't think that's capturing what I've said here. I have to say I can't exactly remember what my mindset was in
Well, you agree this is what...
2014, but sorry.
That's what it tends to suggest, isn't it?
Sorry, what I'd say is the vast majority of the network was using the system fine. On a network that scale, it's impossible, I would think, to bespoke it to each individual's preferences.
Well, it's not their preferences. You call them the whims. Is that what you thought these sub-postmasters were complaining about? That was the basis of their oral and written complaints? Whims. A whim meaning an eccentric flight of fancy.
That is the word I used at the time.
Yes. You understand it to mean that? A whim.
Well, yes. Yeah, that's
Did
the
you
word
think
I
sub-postmasters were on eccentric flights of fantasy?
No.
Why did you use the word whim?
Because it struck me as being possibly very bespoke, very individualised requests for personal preference. But I used the word whim, and I think in doing that I was trying to trivialise the specific complaints being raised.
Is this as an example of what we read about in your witness statement, where you said that the Post Office's approach and strategy was to maintain an open dialogue with the media? You thought saying something like this back would help, did you? This was a comment internally to colleagues. I wasn't saying this is what the response. What's the purpose of saying it to colleagues then? It's to help in the formulation of the response.
Correct.
Is this part of the strategy and approach that you described in your witness statement of at all times maintaining a willingness to maintain an open dialogue with the media?
I don't think they're connected yet, because the way it works is, the way I recall it working for us, is things are circulated for input, views are heard, and then a position taken, at which point that feeds into what is taken back to the media.
Let's move on. We can skip the next paragraph, where you draw an analogy. We go back to some text that Mr. Wallace wrote. So his question was, is your statement about the vast majority of sub-postmasters, and the point there, the statement he is referring to is a statement that the Post Office put out in an earlier reply. Is your statement about the vast majority of sub-postmasters not having any problems with Horizon based on customer feedback or purely on the volume of successful transactions? And then we see your comments. Our customers don't use Horizon. If by customers Nick Wallace means agents or Horizon users, we could point to the churn rate of agents, i.e. if agents aren't happy with Horizon, they can leave the network. That's the same point that you made above. I think this would only show general churn, i.e. it wouldn't distinguish those that left because of Horizon as opposed to any other reason, e.g. retirement. Still, if the network is fairly stable, a low churn would suggest it's only a minority of agents that are unhappy with the system, which is consistent with what we've seen through the scheme. I get the sense from speaking to a number of sub-postmasters that they don't like the system, they don't trust it, and they live in fear of what the Post Office might do if they get something wrong with it. This is Mr. Wallace speaking. It may be because I only come into contact with sub-postmasters who are having problems that I keep hearing this. So it would be useful to know the other side of the coin. You say, same points as above. On the they live in fear point, it is wrong for an agent to deliberately cover up branch losses and falsify the figures the agent enters into the system. So in these paragraphs, in your response to your colleagues, you're making the same point, aren't you? That the measure of Horizon's reliability or success can be seen through the number of sub-postmasters that are leaving the business.
I think it's rather the other way. It could be seen by those who are staying within the business.
I.e., it must be a good system, because otherwise more would leave.
Or at least an acceptable system.
Was that your best evidence base when you were writing this 2 years in to your 2.5 years into your role for the reliability of Horizon, the number of sub-postmasters that were leaving the post office?
No, I'm looking for. I was looking for things that could contribute to the discussion. What was, and maybe this is getting to, well, it's not quite a strategy. I'm sorry. There was, my recollection is that there is a feeling that the complaints being raised about Horizon were being raised by a small number, a small proportion of the network, and that it was being used successfully by the vast majority of the network every day, aggregating up to, and I think I can still remember, hopefully, the numbers, 6 million transactions a year, 6 million transactions a week, 2 billion a year across the 11,500 plus or minus branches. And we were seeing a very small number of complaints.
And he's asking for the data, isn't he? In this last paragraph, if you have any data which shows the vast majority of sub-postmasters love using Horizon and trust it implicitly, it would be useful to have that information. So he's asking the very question that you've just referred to. And then let's see what your response is over the page, please. This is puerile. Why did you think that Mr. Wallace's question, if you've got data that shows that sub-postmasters like using Horizon and trust it, it would be useful to have that information? Why did you think that was puerile? Puerile meaning childish, immature, or petty?
I'd say looking at it today, it doesn't feel puerile, so I think that may
I'm sorry?
I think that may just be a very poorly worded email.
Which word did you intend to use instead of puerile?
I'm sorry, it's on two screens.
Yeah, we can look at the bottom of the third page and the top of the...
Yeah.
So that's it. Question at the bottom of page 4.
I think I know why I'm saying it now. Sorry, that's fine.
You said that
FDMRs love using Horizon and trust it implicitly. It's a very high bar. I don't know too many people who really love their computer systems. I'm sure there are people, but I think that's what the expression is going to. Do we have data that says people love using Horizon?
He's asking, isn't he, for data that backs up a statement that the post office made that the vast majority of sub-postmasters are not having any problems with Horizon.
Well, no, he is there asking for evidence that postmasters love using Horizon and trust it implicitly, and I think I read that as setting an impossibly high standard for us to have evidence, information that would show that. I don't. That's what I think I'm saying there.
You carry on. The best I can think of is to show that agents aren't voting against Horizon with their feet. That's the third time you've referred to that.
Yes.
Was that the best evidence?
I don't know. Certainly when I wrote it was the best I could think.
Overall, would you agree that without focusing on the individual paragraphs, in this part of Mr. Wallace's request, he's asking for some data, some material that backs up a statement that the post office had made that the vast majority of sub-postmasters are not having any problems with Horizon?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Yeah.
Sorry, I was reading.
In this part of his request, he is asking generally for some evidence, some data, some material that backs up a statement that the Post Office had made that the vast majority of sub-postmasters are not having any problems with Horizon. And overall, the best you can come up with is that they're not leaving the business.
That's the best I can come up with. I think earlier on we saw there was references to NBSC, coal log data, etc. I think that would be better management information than churn rate, which was another strand of management information that may support, I guess, user acceptance, if not happiness.
Can we move on to some of your other contributions to Post Office's media responses? Poll 0015-0306. Can we look at page 2, please?
Sorry, I think this is another one that may have been, I sort of wasn't in the core bundle. Can I have a bundle reference?
E86, if you want to look at it in hard copy.
E86, thank you.
So I should just explain to you that the little delays that are occurring are because Mr. Williams has said that he wants to be given the tab numbers in the bundles and read the documents in hard copy rather than looking at them on the screen.
Yeah, I've understood that from the exchanges, Mr. Beer. Thank you.
I'm grateful, sir.
E86. And look at page 2, please. And if we scroll down, please. We see again the Mr. Wallace email. Yes? Mm-hmm. Can you see that? The 16th of December one. And this has got no writing on it. Okay? So it's the same originating email.
Oh, great. Thank you.
But this chain goes off in a different direction. Okay?
Thank you. I appreciate that.
If we scroll up, please. We see Mark Davis's sending it on email we saw earlier. Yeah? And then scroll up, please. We see a reply from Patrick Book. Who was he?
He was is a colleague. I don't know what his title was at that time. He had worked, I think he had come into Post Office to work on the mediation scheme, and I think is now, he's certainly in the communications team. I think maybe the public affairs director, but I'm not certain of that.
At the time, I think his title was Government Affairs and Policy Director. Would that sound right?
That does sound right, thank you.
Let's look at what Mr. Book thought about Mr. Wallace's email. Apart from its breathtakingly facetious tone, this looks to me to be clutching at straws a little. That some sub-postmasters don't like the system is inevitable. I don't particularly like working in Old Street with its rodent problem. Living in fear is going too far, in my view. They chose to sign a contract to provide services in an honest and diligent way, rather than living in fear. Would it not be better to do something else? You agree that he's there expressing the same sentiments as you, albeit you hadn't written them yet. I.e., put up with the system or leave.
No, it's an option.
He says, I like this email that Mel, that's Melanie Caulfield, sent me earlier from a sub-postmaster, and then he reads it, then he sets it out. And then in conclusion, at the foot of his email, he says, I'm not sure it merits more than a cursory response. Then if we scroll up, please, you say to him, I swear you're the only person I've met more cynical than me, and then by some considerable margin. He replies to you, well, thank you, sir. I take that as a serious badge of honour, smiley face. And you say, as intended. Did you treat this as a joke?
No, far from it.
Was this attitude bravado by you? A competition between you and Mr. Berg, the Government Affairs and Policy Director, on who could be more cynical about sub-postmasters?
No.
Why did you exchange these emails then?
When you're working under pressure, at times, sometimes you write an email that, when you look back at it 11 years later, sorry, 9, can't do the math, 9 years later, you regret the expression. But I think emails exchanged just between two colleagues like that from time to time occur.
So we to put this in the banter category, top bants between mates.
I would say yes. Yeah.
The truth of it is that you adopted the same attitude of mind, didn't you? We're deeply cynical about all of these sub-postmasters. The best thing they can do is, if they've got any complaints about our system, they can leave. That was your and his attitude of mind, wasn't it?
No, I think you're reading too much into an email exchange there, with respect.
Well, why didn't we see in these emails some self-reflection? Have we got any surveys of whether sub-postmasters have difficulties? What do the statistics show on the number of calls made to the various help desks that we offered? Is there an analysis of those? Are there any levels of satisfaction with those? What proportion of complaints about Horizon are successfully remediated? That's what he was asking for, that kind of thing, wasn't it?
Well, I'm sorry, that's a list I think you've read. That's not in there. But I imagine it is along the lines of... Well, I don't know what Nick Wallace was asking for there. He asked for what I saw, data of people loving the system and trusting it implicitly.
Right, so you focused on the love bit and thought narrowly.
In the entirety of the
Have we
email.
got any surveys or data that shows that Horizon is loved by sub-postmasters? No, and that's a puerile question, end of story.
No. When you look back at the exchange, you can see other people have contributed to it, and there is reference to NBSE coal log data and the like that provides sources which could be explored further if that's the direction that would be taken in response to this.
Can we look, please, at poll 00101968, B202. And can we go to page 10 at the bottom, please? Page 10 at the bottom. Thank you. Sorry, behind with the bundles.
And sorry, what is the tab?
Do you wish, Mr. Williams,
Yes,
to look
please.
at this in a bundle?
Yes, please. Sorry, my bundle broke open. So I'm sorry.
Right.
I'm trying to put the paper back. Which tab, please?
It's B202.
B202. Thank you. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry, I've only seen these this morning, so I'm still familiarising myself. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Page 10 at the foot of the page and over to page 11.
Yes.
This is a document you exhibited to your witness statement.
Yes, thank you.
You'll see that Jane French, who was then, I think, the BBC's current affairs editor, sending an email on the 7th of January to Mr. Davis, copying Mr. Wallace in. And so this is after the One Show programme had been aired and is instead about a forthcoming Inside Out programme. And if you just scroll through, if we just scroll down, please, she says to Mr. Davis, "Thank you for your input. I'm writing to invite you to give us a filmed interview for our current affairs, our regional current affairs programme, Inside Out, that will be reporting the subject on the 19th of January on BBC One. So this is 12 days in advance. And then if you just scroll through it, rather than reading it in detail, she sets out a summary of the issues to be covered in the programme. Can you see that?
Yeah, yes.
And then if we scroll on still further, it's a relatively detailed summary. And then a series of questions. If we go to page 8, please. And scroll down, please. We'll see that this gets forwarded to you.
Yes.
And we can see your reply on the 7th of January. You say, "I haven't yet looked at the detail of the email, but see that the BBC want to film. There's a lot happening next week," next paragraph. And they're not really a legal issue, I know, but given the BBC's approach to date, the close engagement it has with the JFSA and the timing of the piece, I smell a rat. What was the rat that you smelt?
The timing seemed...
Smelling a
I think
rat
the word.
means that somebody's trying to deceive you or harm you by artifice.
No.
What did you mean by you smelt a rat?
It looks like it's organised. I think something is up.
What was up?
Well, the timing of this seemed to be well aligned to put pressure on Post Office.
Why was there a problem with the BBC reporting issues with the Horizon system and with the Post Office being given an opportunity to respond?
There's nothing wrong with that.
What was the rat then? What was the deception being practiced?
I've said I don't think any deception is being practiced. That's not what I've said.
What were you intending to say by, given the approach to date, the close engagement the BBC has with the JFSA and the timing, I smell a rat? What did you think was going to happen?
I'm sorry, I thought I'd answer that. The timing seemed convenient.
Convenient for who?
The postmaster complainants.
Right.
And
therefore?
I'm sorry, you've lost me. You keep saying, I don't think there's any deceptive. I'm not using that in this respect. That's your interpretation. I'm sorry if you've...
What did you mean by smelling a rat?
I'm sorry, I've tried to answer that a couple of times. It's the timing.
I'll try a third time then. What did you mean by smelling a rat?
That the timing
What did you think the BBC was up to?
They're going to put a piece that was timed with events that may have taken place at a working group face-to-face meeting. It looked like there was building up to a media broadcast or something along those lines that would have advanced the postmaster's complaints.
Can we turn to poll 00105856? That's tab E57. Can we start, please, by looking at page 4,
E5.
57?
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I'll go straight to the bundle in future. I'm sorry. Thank you.
If we just scroll down, you'll see it's an email from Melanie Caulfield, who was in the comms team. Is that right?
Correct.
And if we scroll up, please. She says, we can see who this is addressed to when we look at the reply all later. Now they've finally revealed the names of interviewee experts in inverted commas, including Charles McLaughlin, expert defence witness in the Misra case. I think we should use this to go back to Kerry. And we can see from the context of the email as a whole, this was the beginning of a debate on the approach that should be taken to Kerry Thomas, who I think you may remember in mid-2015 would have been the editor of Panorama. Yes?
That's not something I recall, but no.
In any event, Mel, is talking about a proposed contribution by Professor Charles McLaughlin, yes?
Yes.
And then if we go to page 2, please. At the bottom, we can see what the title of the email was. Another throw of the dice at Kerry Thomas. And you say, I want to think about this overnight, but I'm not inclined to offer anything directly because of the CCRC. Sorry, but we've learned a lot more about the programme since I sent my last email on this. And then over the page to the top of page 3, instead we could use as a hook the BBC guidelines in and around relying on people who are not impartial, which McCracken patently is, especially if they have an axe to grind. And then you set out a proposed reply to the BBC. In what respect did you think Professor McLachlan had an axe to grind?
So the expression axe to grind was one I gained from post office media lawyers. That it's a term of art. I became aware of a type of contributor who may have a vested interest in the piece.
So it was a term of art, axe to grind.
That's my understanding, and that I think was my use of it there.
And does that mean that anyone who had a vested interest, including, for example, sub-postmasters, or indeed the post office, couldn't make a contribution?
No. What I think it lent itself to, and I'm sorry, it's been a while since I've sort of looked at this sort of material on that. It just meant, I think under the BBC guidelines, that their contributions needed to be treated with greater care. I'm paraphrasing, and apologies to BBC if I'm misconstruing that or misstating it, but that's my recollection.
So it was to point out to the BBC that they shouldn't regard Professor McLachlan as impartial and to remind them of their guidelines in that respect. Is that a summary?
That's probably fair, yes.
Thank you. Can we move on, please, to poll 0015-2725? I think that's E91.
Thank you.
And go to page 2.
Sorry, did you say?
E91.
Yeah, I'm sort of looking at that. That doesn't seem... I have poll 152725. This seems to be different.
Yeah, poll 0015-2725. Tab E91.
I have I'm sorry, I beg your pardon, I do have the...
Yeah, the double-sided pages.
Thank you. I'm sorry.
On the 3rd of July 2015, Mel Caulfield wrote to you, not sure if any use, was just checking on something, came across the below from Kumarich Solicitors, and you'll see that she cuts in something in the second paragraph from that firm of solicitors' website. In 2013, when interim report came out, it just confirms they're looking at appeals, then regarding the cases they had, I think Hamilton and Misra, but can't remember, on the basis of information from the investigation. So you thought it might be of use to you at some point. It also makes clear, case-by-case basis, a point I'm still trying to make to journos and politicians understand. How can anything be decided in any other way? And then back to the first page, please. Foot of the page. You say, thanks, Mel. You might recall that the first one show piece at the end of last year interviewed a criminal solicitor who may be from that firm. It's telling they've not been involved in any appeal. And yes, each case has to be looked at on its own facts. And then scroll up, please. She replies to you, yes, that was Izzy Hogg, who's from this firm, I think. I believe she gave the incredible quote that, quote, they don't look like criminals. From a media point of view, I'm astounded that no one ever seems to ask the defence lawyers why their clients pleaded guilty and why they've not tried to appeal. Seems it's only the post office who get asked the questions. Oh well, sunny weekend ahead, hopefully. And Panorama story still not showing in the schedules. Was it a commonly held view within the post office to think that it was only the post office who got asked the questions?
I can't speak for post office.
Okay, the people with whom you dealt within the post office.
I don't recall that. No, I mean we were being asked questions, and I'm sure other people were as well.
Was it a common view within the post office that focus should instead be asking the defence lawyers why their clients pleaded guilty and why they've not tried to appeal?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Was it a common view within the post office that the focus should instead be on asking defence lawyers why their clients pleaded guilty and why they had not tried to appeal?
Again, I don't think I don't know who else was in post office, but that's not something I was turning my mind to, I don't think.
Was there a view, an attitude of mind that the post office was being got at by sub-postmasters and the media?
Maybe not by postmasters, but I think it is probably fair to say we were feeling a little bit got at by the media. I think that's fair.
Can we move on to poll 0015 2777, please, which is the next tab E92. And look at the second page, at the foot of the page. And if we just scroll down a little bit, we can see who Mark is. You'll see that he is a writer of at the Shropshire Star, or at least he was in mid-2015. We scroll up to the text of his email. He says, further to our conversation a few minutes ago, I'm following up the story that Second Sight has written to the government, saying that its findings of its report on the Horizon system have been misrepresented. The story is on page 10 of yesterday's Telegraph. I've spoken to Ron Warmington of Second Sight, who's confirmed his concerns have been misrepresented after the Minister said Second Sight produced two independent reports, one in 2013 and the other earlier this year, both of which found there was no evidence of systemic flaws in the system. Mr. Warmington has said that the term systemic can only be used when referring to a constant fault. That is why the report said there were no systemic faults. However, he says the report clearly said there were circumstances where a combination of factors could lead to a fault in the system which could account for some of the discrepancies which have resulted in civil and criminal proceedings against the postmasters. Can I have a response? And then if we scroll up, please. That gets forwarded by Melanie Caulfield to some people, not including you, and then gets forwarded by Mark Underwood of the Complaint Review and Mediation Scheme to you. And if we scroll up, please. Keep scrolling. If we go to the top of the page, you say, I'm uncomfortable with the final sentence. We'll look at what that is in a moment. I know we've used it in the draft Panorama statement, but I want to think on it overnight to make sure the line to both Shropshire Star and Panorama properly covers the two bugs we identified for Second Sight, which did affect balances. And so if we scroll down, please, you see in the bold text there the proposed reply that Ms Caulfield was going to give back to the Shropshire Star. And you had said you were uncomfortable with the final sentence, despite it being used previously. The final sentence is, this work, that's over 3 years there have been exhaustive investigations into a very small number of complaints. This work has provided overwhelming evidence that the computer system was not responsible for the missing money in these post office branches. Why were you uncomfortable with using the sentence, this work has provided overwhelming evidence that the computer system was not responsible for any missing money?
I think the use of overwhelming is a very, very high bar, and it's not an exact one, but a very high one. And we should be trying to make sure that we don't make statements that can't be substantiated, corroborated, or defended.
Would a simpler explanation for you being uncomfortable with that final sentence be that it wasn't true?
No, I don't know that it wasn't true. As I say, it was just a very high bar and capable of different interpretations. This is a media line, I think, and I'm cautious. It's you're being hostage to fortune when you set your stall out that high.
So it was the strength with which the sentence was expressed rather than the substance of what was being said that you were uncomfortable with?
Well, and also, I guess the conclusion. You know, I'm not sure that would necessarily have led to that. I'm not sure that it didn't. I just think it was too uncertain. I think, or potentially indefensible.
Was it because by August 2015, this is a matter we'll look at later today and maybe tomorrow morning, that you knew that the work of Second Sight hadn't provided evidence, let alone overwhelming evidence, that the computer system wasn't responsible for missing money?
Sitting now, I can't say that that's a connection, but it may have been.
Okay, I'll move on. Poll 0011308. This is tab E65.
E65.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
And this is a chronology of the Complaint and Review Mediation Scheme, I think produced by the Post Office itself. And can we go, please, to page 13? And 4 boxes from the top. There's a reference to a meeting on the 4th of September 2015 between you, Mark Davis, and the BBC's most senior executive, James Harding. And the chronology records that at that meeting, the Post Office acknowledged the legitimate public interest in scrutiny of the Post Office, including the BBC, Nevertheless, the Post Office made the point that the Panorama programme was unbalanced and misleading in its presentation of the facts, and that the BBC failed to take up the many opportunities the Post Office had offered, which would have facilitated a fairer programme. And it reserved the right to make a formal complaint to the Trust. But what were the numerous opportunities that the Post Office had offered to the BBC that would have facilitated a fairer programme?
So do you know who the author of this is? I don't. I only received it quite late.
It's unattributed.
Okay, thank you. I think that there are two offers that I can remember. Well, one was initially for a talking head interview, so a live to camera interview, and another was to share some material from a file relating to a particular contributor to the program.
Was it those 2 points that led to the view that the Panorama programme was unbalanced and misleading, or was it about the content too?
No, I think it was definitely the content too.
It was the content too?
Yes.
Thank you. So that's an appropriate moment to break, please. Could we break until past, please?
Yes, of course. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good morning, sir. Can you continue to see and hear us?
I can, thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Williams. Just one last document, please, on this topic of media relations.
Thank you.
Poll 00232517, and that's at E104.
104, thank you.
And if we just look at page 3 to get the context. There's an email from Mark Davis to you and others referring to that meeting that we looked at before the break. Rod and I met James Harding, BBC's Director of News and Current Affairs, and Kerry Thomas, Editor of Panorama. Today, as you know, Head of Complaints also attended. It was useful to have the opportunity to land our points about the BBC approach and the reality of the cases featured. Grateful for you for attending and his excellent support, and Mel for her pack. Mr. Harding listened and responded positively without making any commitments, as we'd expect. We've landed key points. And then if we go to page 2, please. There's, if we scroll down to later on the 4th of September, Mark Davis says, I'd like to review the complaint again. This is the complaint against the BBC that was being formulated. Actually, to make it even more comprehensive, I think we need to formally note the views and involvement of Nick Wallace. And then over the page, please, to page 1. At the foot of the page. That's it. Mr. Davis says, on an email sent to Susan Barty and copied to you, I think we should build out a section, this is in the complaint letter, we should build out a section on Nick Wallace's involvement. In a nutshell, I'd be looking to say that A, Mr. Wallace has clear views which threaten BBC impartiality. B, this point is underlined by the BBC previously requesting that he remove a blog post on this issue. C, we were not informed he was involved in Panorama, which seems a breach of good faith. And D, we know he was involved because he had boasted about it on his Facebook page. In adding this point, I think we should provide examples, Mel has them, outlining where he has gone on his blog beyond journalism and into campaigning against the Post Office. I'd also use this letter to formally question why, when approaching contributors, the BBC have never featured the views of the NFSP. Even if the NFSP has declined approaches, there's on-the-record footage of George Thompson talking about the issue. At this stage, did you agree that Mr. Wallace held views that it threatened the impartiality of the BBC?
I don't. Those aren't my words. No.
No, that's why I was asking you whether you agreed that Mr. Wallace held views that threaten the impartiality of the BBC?
I didn't hold that view. I didn't turn my mind to whether they did or didn't.
Did you turn your mind to whether or not the BBC had acted or not acted in good faith?
Not on good faith, no. I didn't turn my mind to those concepts.
Was there a kind of bunker mentality amongst the senior leadership in the Post Office in relation to Horizon and the media's treatment of it?
I don't know that I can speak for senior management, but I do think certainly where I was sitting, it did feel a bit bunker mentality. Yes, I can't speak for the senior executives.
Were you in the bunker?
Yeah, I probably was. Yes.
Can we turn to a different topic, please? And that's your relationship with external legal advisors. That can come down from the screen. By 2016, you had been legally qualified for 21 years, is that right?
I think so, yes.
And you've been admitted as a solicitor in this jurisdiction for 14 of those years.
2016, that would be correct, yeah, plus or minus.
And you were by that time specialised, an expert in civil litigation.
I certainly had experience and obviously 16 years of it in civil litigation. There's always somebody more expert than me in this field, I found.
Can we look, please, at poll 303 8852? B260, if you want to look at it.
Thank you. Oh, yes. Yep.
This is, if we just scroll down to the foot of the page, an email from Amy Prime, who was a solicitor at Bond Dickinson. And if we go to the top of the page, please, we can see it's her email to you of the 10th of May 2016, copied, amongst other people, to Andrew Parsons, the partner at Bond Dickinson.
Can I just check something? I don't think that date is correct. I think this is, we struggled to find this, and I think, I'm happy to be corrected by somebody. I think that it's using the American date referencing, so I think it's the 5th of October.
Okay, fine.
That becomes, sorry, I beg your pardon. I wanted to clear, and if I'm wrong about that, I apologise, but that's my understanding.
In any event, in 2016, either in the summer or autumn, Amy Prime, a solicitor at Bond Dickinson, was emailing you with a request for instructions on a request for disclosure in relation to Post Office's investigation guidelines. Yes?
Yes.
Can we look at the email, please? She says in the email, and I should say that Miss Prime, who was then recently qualified, had sent a draft of this email to the partner, Andrew Parsons, first, and he contributed to the drafting of it. Documents that the inquiry has make that clear, and that's a matter we'll take up with others later in the phase. In any event, Ms. Prime says, Freeths have requested that we provide them with Post Office's investigation guidelines since 1998, including any revisions to date. In the earlier round of disclosure, we did not provide the guidelines since we wished to confirm whether the documents were covered by privilege. Brian Altman has confirmed they will not be covered by privilege, and as such, the guidelines will at some point have to be disclosed. We've reviewed the most recent version of the guidelines, which were adopted in January 2016, and the prior version, which were adopted in August 2013. Of note, the 2013 version attached password, and then if you scroll up, please, you can see that there is indeed conduct of criminal investigation policy V2 300813 as an attachment. And scroll back down. Of note, the 2013 version attached provides, quote, should the recent second site review be brought up by a subject or his representative during a PACE interview, the security manager should state, I will listen to any personal concerns or issues you may have had with the Horizon system during the course of this interview. Freeth will more than likely use this statement as an opportunity to confirm that Post Office responded to postmasters using stock answers, a point which has already been raised in relation to the helpline, and further could be spun to show that the Post Office was not taking issues with Horizon seriously and were trying to ignore any issues which were raised. Although we may face some criticism later on, we are proposing to try and suppress the guidelines for as long as possible on the grounds that the most recent version is not relevant since it postdates the investigations complained of, and it would require a full disclosure exercise to piece together all historic versions of the guidelines. We thought it would be best to bring this to your attention early. For now, we'll do what we can to avoid disclosure of these guidelines and try to do so in a way that looks legitimate. However, we're ultimately withholding a key document, and this may attract some criticism from Freeth. If you disagree with this approach, do let me know. Otherwise, we'll adopt this approach until such time as we sense the criticism is becoming serious. If you'd like to discuss, please don't hesitate to call. So your solicitors had both the 2013 and the 2016 versions of the investigations guidelines, yes?
Yeah, that's what it seems like, yes.
And indeed, they attached the 2013 version to the email, yes?
That's what it shows, yes.
And they made a proposal that was essentially summarising threefold. Firstly, that the Post Office should, through its lawyers, suppress disclosure for as long as possible. Do you agree?
Yeah, that's what it says, yes.
Secondly, that suppression should be done in a way that looked legitimate to the outside world. Agree?
Yeah, that's what it says, yes.
And third, that you were to say, if you disagreed, that disclosure should be suppressed, but at the same time be made to look legitimate to the outside world.
I don't think it quite says that, but that's certainly the gist, yes.
And there's no record of you saying that you did disagree, saying don't do that, it's wrong, is there?
There's no record. As I say, I think I say this in my statement. I did not recall. I have no recollection of this email, which is regrettable because.
Are you used to getting emails from other lawyers saying we should suppress documents?
I'm used to getting a lot of emails.
So
I don't recall reading this at the time. It was clearly sent to me. It was clearly addressed to me, but I do not recall. And the reason why I mentioned the date is when the inquiry provided this to me. I'll be frank. It's a concerning email.
I bet. You searched your emails like frantic, no doubt, didn't you?
Well, I did, and I couldn't find anything around it until the dates were swapped, and I looked around October, and I did indeed receive it. It was in my inbox.
And you didn't reply to it?
No. But
you didn't say, no, don't do that.
I did not reply to it, but I do not recall reading it carefully. I don't recall it in any size, shape, or colour.
Well, your actions are the more important thing, rather than your present recollection.
That's fair. Mm-hmm.
What we can say is that you didn't reply.
Correct.
Saying, no, lawyers shouldn't suppress relevant documents. They shouldn't do so in a way that is made to look legitimate. And they certainly shouldn't do so because the content of the document is concerning and might be used by our opponent to make a good argument against us. You didn't do any of those things, did you?
No, I certainly didn't reply in writing. As I say, I don't recall calling either, which is the invitation there. I don't recall any action on this. So no, I did not take any action in response to this.
Had the Post Office given Bond Dickinson instructions to take an approach like this generally to disclosure? i.e. a rigid, hard-line approach to disclosure?
No, we had not. I do recall at many stages with disclosure was quite a big issue, as I think does come clear through some of my evidence. Well, hopefully it comes through some of my evidence. And it was a challenge for Post Office because we held most of the documents and would be doing the lion's share of the disclosure. And like all large disclosure exercises, it's a challenge for the claimants who have an idea of what you have but don't know quite what it is because they don't have it. And Andy and I used to talk about if we couldn't do something, what else could we offer that would approximate it? You know, we'd say the no-but approach. That's the recollection I have of our approach to disclosure to it. And as I say, this is inconsistent with that. I accept that, which is why I find it odd.
Why was the Post Office suppressing disclosure of documents which it considered may harm its defence?
Well, the reasons being advanced are in the email. I think this was made before formal disclosure orders, so this is in pre-action stage. But
they'd asked for this. They'd asked for, I think, 30-odd classes of material, and one of them was investigation guidelines. And this had been identified, the 2013 version, as containing a passage that might harm the Post Office's defence. That's the only reason given for not disclosing it.
That's all I've seen there. Yeah.
Is that a legitimate reason for not disclosing a document, that it might harm your defence?
No, not to me, it's not. And I would hope that wasn't my view then either. I don't believe it was, but as I say, I don't recall any reaction to this.
Did you enjoy such a close relationship with your solicitors in the group litigation that it was perfectly acceptable openly to discuss the suppression of disclosure and covering it up by making it seem legitimate in emails of this kind?
I have to say no, and this is inconsistent with most of my dealings on this matter with our solicitors.
But you didn't do anything to pull Bond Dickinson up on this, did you?
On this, no.
Can we move on, please?
Well, in reality, Mr. Williams, this email should have had a prompt response from you to the effect of, you can't possibly do that. That's right, isn't it?
That's what I'd like. When I looked at this, it is quite possible, and I offer this in no way as an excuse because that's what would have been desirable. The first line is, it says it's not urgent, to consider as and when you get a chance. And as I say, I do recall I was dealing with something very urgent at the time. But I'd sitting here today, I'd like to say I did that, but I didn't, sir.
But I'm right, aren't I? There should have been a prompt reply, and it should have been, you can't possibly do that.
Yes, Your Honor.
Fine. Thank you.
Well, there's another view of it. The penultimate paragraph says, if you disagree, you must get in touch.
Yes.
So it was like a negative resolution. We're going to do this unless you pipe up. And you didn't disagree.
I did not disagree.
Thank you. Can we move on? Poll 304 3169. That's E37. And again, I'm still on the topic of dealing with external legal advisors. Just a bit of context before we dive in. We're now many years later in October 2019, and the Post Office had managed to conduct the Horizon Issues trial, which was concerned with whether there were known errors in Horizon, without disclosing to the claimants and to the court many important known error logs. Okay?
All right, thank you.
Can we turn to page 4 at the bottom, please? We can see your email of the 19th of October. Ben, and this is to Mr. Fote, please find an updated board update. Set out below are the keynotes to address the points from your email on what would it take to get all of the KEL review done by next week, and what is the scope of a Fujitsu audit that would diminish the risk of creating documents that would then need to be disclosed to the claimants. And then reading on. Generally, and I'm afraid there's some text in here in the email we've been provided with that makes it harder to read, but I think we can get the sense to it. You say, I have stressed firmly to the HSF and Womble Bond Dickinson teams the importance of this work stream. It's being escalated to Alan Watts at HSF and Tom Beezer at Womble Bond Dickinson to make sure our board's requirements are met, and they were both CC'd. The key legal risk here is the ongoing duty in the GLO litigation to disclose adverse documents, which may not exist or which we may not have been aware of, but for taking the action now contemplated, especially in the context of material we've not previously seen. And then under the heading new KELs, you say Womble Bond Dickinson are assessing the risk over the weekend of the 94 newly disclosed high-risk KELs. By the middle of the week, counsel will have reviewed these KELs in detail and given a view on whether they're likely to cause the Horizon trial to be recommenced or judgment delayed. The counsel team being best placed to identify the impact they may have on the trial they conducted. So trial over, 94 high-risk KELs that had been newly disclosed after the evidence had finished, and counsel were looking at, are we going to have to recommence the trial, i.e. hear some more evidence, or ask the judge to delay giving judgment. And then in relation to the other KELs not used at trial, i.e. the majority of the around 14,000 new KELs, the key risk of reviewing these is that claimants have not yet asked for the documents. So by reviewing them now, we are doing the claimant's work for them. The legal advice, therefore, is we should not review the 14,000 other KELs unless the claimants ask for them, or counsel's review of the 94 high-risk KELs warrants a wider review. And then if you just read the next couple of bullet points to yourself. And then under audit at the end, the best way to mitigate the risk of generating adverse or disclosable documents through an audit is to keep it focused on Fujitsu's litigation support provided to date, with any operational audit to follow once the litigation has been resolved and its associated disclosure duties continued. You'll see that in the course of the legal advice that you gave to Mr. Fote there, you said, that can come down from the screen, thank you, that in relation to the 14,000 odd new KELs, there was a risk, if Post Office reviewed them, that you were doing the claimant's work for them because the claimants hadn't yet asked for those documents. Yes?
Yes, that's what that says.
Was that an approach that you took to disclosure generally? Unless the other side asks for a document, there is no need to review your own material to see whether it meets the test for disclosure?
No. Sorry, I want to make sure I'm saying no to the right thing. That was not my understanding of our approach to disclosure in the litigation.
Was it your approach to disclosure of the known error logs, the around 14,000 of them, at this stage?
No, it was. It depends. You talk, which are you talking about the new KELs or the?
I'm talking about the 14,000 that were not the 94 high-risk ones that had been disclosed.
So I'm sorry, I'm confusing myself now. Sorry, could you ask the question again, please?
Yes. Was it then your approach that in relation to those 14,000 known error logs, a relevant consideration was whether the claimants had asked for them or not?
In trying to work out what Post Office was to do with these, clearly thought it was a relevant consideration.
Why is that a relevant consideration?
Is it something that the business wants to do?
In law, why is it a relevant consideration?
Sorry, you'll lose me. What is that? Whether the claimants do it or not? We had operated. No, so we have a duty to disclose adverse documents. That's my understanding.
And can you discharge that duty without looking at the documents?
I suspect it'd be difficult to.
And that's what you were proposing not to do.
But I don't necessarily think it's wrong because the disclosure was focused to whatever had been ordered.
None of this had been ordered.
But across the entire business, not every corner was turned. But you'll also see, so doing the claimant's work for them, I'm trying to think why I said that.
Let's have the document back up on the screen.
I have it in front of me.
Poll 3043169. Scroll up, please. Under new KELs, second bullet point. First bullet point, you deal with the 94 that have already been disclosed, and counsel are assessing whether this is going to cause some rather catastrophic consequences for the trial.
Yes,
that's already taken place.
Yes.
Second bullet point, in relation to other KELs, the 14-odd thousand, the key risk of reviewing them is that the claimants haven't asked for them yet. By reviewing them, we're doing the claimant's work for them. My question's really simple. You were suggesting that there's no need to review your own material to see whether it met the test for disclosure, weren't you?
That's but I'm also saying that. So that seems to, on the next bullet point, that seems to be supported by legal advice, and I'd like to. I don't remember that advice, but that's the sort of thing I'd like to refresh myself on, because that seems to underpin what the statement above it is, and I'm afraid I don't recall it.
So you saying that the next bullet point, the legal advice, is not referring to the legal advice that you are here giving in this email. It's referring to somebody else's legal advice that you're regurgitating.
Quite possibly. I'm struggling with and I've highlighted it, so I've clearly brought it to the attention. I'm trying to work out now why I wrote that in the way I did, and I think I say sort of quite often what I do, and in a circumstance like this is highly likely I'd have been doing it, is that this issue of the new late found KELs was pretty alarming and generated a lot of activity and requests for information to understand what was going on. You can see we'd instructed, it sounds like counsel plus 2 law firms were engaged on it. I would have been, and I think this is sort of looking at this email, I remember the time, I don't remember drafting this email, but I remember the time. I would have been trying to find out what's happening, what needs to happen, and synthesize that into digestible bullet points for people to understand the position so that we either proceed with known risks, with knowledge of the known risks, or decide not to do things with knowledge of those risks as well. So on the when I say the legal advice, my guess is, and I'm sorry, I can't remember the specifics, but being told not to do it, I think will have come from a collection of the lawyers involved, which includes me as well as the external lawyers.
I take it this, if this advice does originate from others, it's not advice that you disagreed with?
Well, I mean, quite clearly, if we were reviewing it, we would be doing the claimant's work for them. As soon as we reviewed, we would see something. If it was adverse, we had a duty to disclose it. So
Isn't that a reason to do something rather than not to do it in the legal system?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. It depends on the circumstance. And I'm thinking in this circumstance, it seems to be suggested that was acceptable. But
When you take it together with the final bullet point
yeah,
under audit about mitigation of risk, you say essentially before we look at these KELs, before we audit them, we should wait for the litigation to be over so that our associated disclosure duties have concluded.
yes, I do say that.
So what you're saying, whether yourself or in synthesizing the views of others, is don't look at 14,000 new KELs because they might contain material that's adverse to our case, and in that respect we would be doing the claimant's work for them. Instead, wait until the litigation is over and our disclosure duties have passed, then conduct an operational audit.
That is what it says. Although looking at that, it wouldn't have closed off any disclosure duties as I understood them in any.
Why does it say wait until the litigation has been resolved and its associated disclosure duties concluded then?
I'm sorry, I agree. That's what it says.
But can you help us with this at all, please?
I'm sorry, what's the question, please?
It appears to suggest that the Post Office's suggested approach from its lawyers, either from you or communicated through you, is that we shouldn't look at documents that might contain adverse material because we might have to disclose them. Instead, let's wait until the litigation is over and our duties of disclosure have ceased to arise.
Yeah, that's what it says. I'm sorry, I'm missing your question. I'm sorry, I'm being thick.
But do you think that's appropriate?
I'm saying it's a way to mitigate the risk.
Risk of what?
Well,
Disclosing adverse documents?
My understanding, and I'm happy to be corrected, my understanding of civil litigation is the duty of disclosure in the litigation ends with the litigation. Once the litigation concluded, we didn't have a duty to disclose. To
And that's why you have to discharge the duty in the litigation before it's concluded.
But that is what was that work was being undertaken. That work was being undertaken. It's a question of how far you go with it.
Thank you. That can come down.
Before it does, Mr. Beer, I just want to. I may be being wholly unduly pedantic, but there's something itching away at me. Could you put it back up again, please, that document? Just so that I've understood the timing of this, Mr. Williams, the Horizon Issues trial had taken place, but the judgment had not been given. So within that time period, is that correct?
That's my understanding, sir.
Yeah, right. Now, the word disclosure may have more than one meaning in the context that I'm talking about. But in civil litigation, you give disclosure by producing a list of documents. You don't actually begin by simply sending the other side a bundle of documents, do you? You actually produce a list to notify them of what you had.
That's correct, sir. That's
Right.
my understanding.
Now, in relation to these 14,000 KELs, which are described in this document as new KELs, had they ever been listed either in a formal list or referred to in a letter to the claimant's lawyers to notify them that they existed?
My understanding is that had happened, sir. That had happened fairly promptly
Right.
upon being notified of these.
So that I'm not misunderstanding what's gone on, you are telling me that the existence of these documents had not been hidden from the claimant, but nobody had looked at them to gauge their relevance. Is that it?
Almost. It's looking at this. That is correct. That they were notified. It's my understanding. I only received this document, which it wasn't referred to my Rule 9 request. So I haven't looked around this as I have some of the other issues. So this is my understanding with that caveat. So my understanding is
so that the inquiry can satisfy itself if it wants to about this. What you are in effect telling me is that there will be a document in existence which shows that the solicitors acting for the claimants were notified of the existence of these 14,000 documents.
I sincerely hope so, because that is my understanding, sir.
Right. All right.
And then...
All right, well, that's fine. Thank you very much. That's your understanding, and we'll see in due course where we go from there. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I think that document can come down now. Can we turn, please, to your view of sub-postmasters and turn up paragraphs 44 and 45 of your witness statement, please?
For 44 and 45, is that right?
Yes. You say I've been asked to comment on some July 13 emails concerning the calendar square bug, sometimes called the Falkirk bug. Mm-hmm. These events happened over 10 years ago, and I do not now have a firm recollection of how they unfolded. As far as I recall, I was asked by Simon Baker to find out whether horizon bugs had been referred to in any previous court actions in anticipation of the publication of the Second Sight interim report. This led me to put this question to Womble, Bond, Dickinson and DAC Beechcroft, given that to the best of my knowledge they were the Post Office external lawyers most likely to have supported Post Office in any civil action. This activity made clear to me that horizon bugs had been discussed in two court cases, namely the 2007 civil case of Castleton and the criminal prosecution of Seema Misra. In the context that I was looking at them in mid-2013, however, there was no reason for me to look into this further. That was because the cases had concluded quite some time earlier, and there were no indications from those I was supplying the information to that anything further was required. So essentially, you're saying in mid-2013, you had cause to inquire about past cases, and that inquiry had led you to two cases in which horizon bugs had been discussed, Lee Castleton and Seema Misra.
Correct.
Can we look, please, at poll 0011 7614? That's E68. And turn to pages 3 and 4, please. If we just look at the end of 4, we can see it's signed off Tim. And if we go back to page 3, we can see it's an email from Tim McCormack to Paula Venables with the subject, it had to happen sooner or later, and it was sent on the 14th of October 2015. And he says, I should say this is one of a number of emails that Mr. McCormack sent directly to Miss Venables in October 15 regarding errors in Horizon. He says, this may be the last you hear from me directly. It's a last chance for you to accept what I've been telling you these last few years is true. I now have clear and unquestionable evidence of an intermittent bug in Horizon that can and does cause thousands of pounds losses to sub-postmasters. Tonight there's a branch in your network sitting on a loss of five figures. The money does not exist. It's as a result of several one-sided transactions being entered erroneously by the system, not the operator. I've documentation from post office employees acknowledging the error and that it's happened before. I have the source documentation from the sub-postmaster concerned. I've evidence of a similar event happening 2 years ago. It's also documented. I have a limited channel of contacts in the industry. 2 similar events, plus the admission by your employee that he's aware of other events, is a high percentage, and the error soon to be exposed will result in more coming to light. Most importantly, it's an error that would not be noticed by many sub-postmasters and could well be the reason for many of the GFSA cases. I have 3 options. A, this email is the first option. Appeal to your sense of decency and compassion to accept that many of the claimants in the GFSA saga are honest and decent citizens whose lives were destroyed by your organisation. B, go to the press and see what happens. Or C, await the inevitable judicial review where you will personally be exposed and perhaps leave yourself open to criminal charges. We can stop this farce now. You can wake up and realise that the people you rely on to tell you the truth about what is happening don't have the ability to do so. Option B happens on Friday. I've one former sub-postmaster who's keen to proceed with JR. Option C could happen sooner than you think. You've 2 options. A, ignore this email and accept the consequences. Or B, travel with me to the branch in question. See for yourself the evidence. Talk with the sub-postmaster concerned and reach your own conclusion. I want nothing out of this and will meet my own costs. If we look at the foot of page 2, one of the executive assistants to Paula Venables sends the email on to Angela van den Boogaard and others. Please see email from Tim. Can you advise what action we need to take? Further up the page. Angela van den Boogaard sends it to Mr. Davis and to you. Mark, Rod. My view is that we should ask him to share the information with us so we can make an informed decision on how to proceed. So actually taking up essentially part of option A. Agreed?
Yes.
I'd suggest this is probably best coming from Paula in the first instance. And then over the page, your reply. Thanks, Angela. I agree we should ask for the information, but recommend that we write to him in the same terms that we have every other person who said they've had evidence of flaws. Kay Linnell, Second Sight, Nick Wallace, Sandy Patel, QC, Professor Button. I've sent those letters in the past, and I'm happy to do so again. I'm also pretty sure I know about the JR he's referring to, and I've already sent a holding letter to that former postmaster acknowledging receipt of his complaint, so my name might be known to Tim already. If you agree, I'll circulate something shortly. I'll want to send it hard copy. Generally, my view is that this guy's a bluffer who keeps expecting us to march to his tune. I don't think we should do so, but instead respond with a straight bat. And Mr. Davis agrees at the top, saying, thanks, Rod, wise advice, with which I agree. By this time, October 2015, you acknowledge, we saw in your witness statement, that you were aware of suggestions that there were bugs in Horizon arising from your knowledge of the Seema Misra case and the Lee Castleton case, yes?
Correct.
The Second Sight report, the interim report, and its second report had been published by now, hadn't they?
Yes.
Why did you think Mr. McCormack was a bluffer?
So I think the bluffing is in relation to the you have options or else, the sort of threat. And he'd been a serial correspondent. I don't know where this sits in the course of that time. But my understanding is, my recollection, and it is a recollection, I am, again, so this is one of the more recently disclosed, is certainly we offered, and I think it may have been Angela van der Bogard, met with him to try and understand the issue in the branch. And so, we had already started to take steps to understand, but if he had information, which he was clearly saying he had, he should be able to share that with us so we could manage it, we could process it, understand it, and respond as appropriate. He wasn't very specific with what the issue was or where it was, so there are very limited lines of inquiry that we had internally without something more from him.
Why did you recommend that the Post Office should respond with a straight bat, i.e. avoid answering the direct questions or giving them the information they want and just bat it back to them?
No, that's not what I'm saying there at all. Saying a straight bat is whatever I think about the correspondent, we should respond to his inbound inquiry seriously and appropriately. That's what I mean by a straight bat.
You weren't referring to responding with a straight bat there as meaning when a batsman holds their bat vertically and just knocks the ball back to the person that sent it to them.
I don't know, this is the second time a straight bat to me means appropriately.
Honestly, appropriately.
Yes.
That's the sense in which you are using the expression rather than as I've used it, i.e. bat it straight back to them.
Yeah, no, sorry, straight bat is appropriately.
What investigation was in fact carried out?
I recall writing a letter, as I think I indicated, to Mr. McCormack. I also recognised the letters that I'd put in brackets where we'd invited other people to send. I think his was slightly different. I seem to recall it being a little bit different, where I tried to address in his email, he said there were concerns that, what did he say? People not giving the right. Sorry, maybe not here. Sorry, it's not in this one. No, sorry, it's not in this. I can't see it in there. I've lost my train of thought. Sorry. I wrote a letter to him inviting him to share it, and I think I added some extra comfort around that the material would, to try and give him confidence that the material would be treated properly.
Can we move on then in your dealings with Mr. McCormack?
Yep.
Poll 00119584. That's E69.
69. Yep.
If we start by looking at page 4 and 5.
So it's the date.
We're now in July of the following year.
Thank you.
And Mr. McCormack emails the Post Office, copying Paula Venables and Tim Parker in relation to an investigation into the prosecution of Seema Misra. Can you just scan that, the first part of that correspondence? And then if we go to page 5, a third paragraph, Mr. McCormack says that he finds it utterly appalling that Post Office seek to prolong the suffering of a woman, that Seema Misra, who very clearly did not commit the crime she was accused and convicted of. You have the opportunity to contact the CCRC straight away on this matter and ensure Miss Misra suffers no longer than she has to. I urge you to do so today. At the moment, I'm prepared to consider incompetence as the rational explanation behind these contemptible failings of the Post Office, to understand that Horizon is capable of producing intermittent errors that result in huge paper losses at sub-postmaster branches. Any subsequent delay will make me consider the far more serious matter of conspiracy. And then if we can go, please, to page 1.
Mm-hmm.
Foot of the page. Keep going, please. Thank you. You say, I'm not inclined to reply. Certainly we don't need to, given the tone of this and his other communications, and we've already told him we're not going to comment. Mm-hmm. And then further up the page, you provide a draft for Miss Vennell's executive assistant and say, Aveen, on reflection, I'd like to go back to Mr. McCormack with a short response for no other reason than to ensure he can't allege we don't respond to issues. Mr. McCormack, Post Office Limited asked me to respond. Post Office will be happy to consider any information you may care to disclose. However, and in line with my previous reply to you, Post Office will not comment on the other matter you've raised. Why were you writing these responses back to Mr. McCormack or drafting responses back to Mr. McCormack, which all simply shut down what he was saying and didn't say, we will investigate the concerns that he raised?
And have we got anywhere in the bundle? It is referred to two bits of correspondence from the one's the 4th of July 2016 and the other's 19 November, I assume is 2015. Do we have either of those?
I can certainly try and find those over lunch. Are you saying that in those we will find?
I'm not sure. I'd like to see them because they are referred to. Because I think consistent with the previous email, we said we should ask him for what he's got. And if we don't receive stuff, there's a limit to how much correspondence you can engage with the person who won't give you lines of inquiry or sufficient information to take it forward. And I think in those circumstances, and I think this was happening at the time, it's appropriate to try and draw the correspondence to an end or to a point where it can be taken forward meaningfully.
Did you think he was a mischief maker?
No, I think he was a genuinely concerned individual.
You didn't think he was making mischief?
I don't quite know what you mean by that. I think he was concerned. I mean, making mischief to me sounds like this is a bit of a giggle. I don't think nothing I saw in any of his correspondence made me think that. Quite the opposite. I think he was genuinely motivated to raise issues with us. The challenge we had is we weren't quite sure what the issue was.
You couldn't tell from Mr. McCormack. He wasn't explaining himself clearly enough to you.
He just wasn't giving us any information to take things forward. His references to an issue in a branch it's not something.
He was inviting the chief executive to come to the branch and not rely on people like you who were misinforming her.
That's true. That's a lot of people ask lots of chief executives.
Why not take that up with some other person and say, okay, we'll come to the branch and we'll look at an error unfolding before our eyes, as you, Mr. McCormack, say will happen?
As I say, my recollection is that had taken place with Angela Van Bogard, but I'm not 100% confident of that recollection. That's what my understanding is. Sorry, that's what my belief is.
Lastly on this topic, can we look at poll 304-1382? That's E28.
I'm sorry if I'm not as clear as this. I did only see these on Friday evening, so I'm not as familiar with the documents around here as I am with others in my statement.
E28.
Thank you.
Can we start, please, on page 7? If we scroll down, please. Oh, sorry, scroll up a bit. Thank you. There's an anonymous freedom of information request. Can you see that on the middle of page 7? And if we scroll up, please. Angela van den Boogaard sends that on to a range of people and says, in the light of the court action, I think legal should draft a response on this. We've provided the anonymous person options to resolve the alleged issue and cannot do much else in this public arena, and advise what they should do if they want an internal review. I think the response should be based on the fact this isn't a request for recorded information and whatever context are felt to be required. Therefore, I've attached the basic response for this amendment. And then if we go forward to page 5, please. In the middle of the page.
Yeah.
So if we can scroll, that's it. Ms. van den Boogaard says to you, this postmaster clearly thinks the answer to their problem is in this list of errors and in all likelihood is therefore not looking or does not want to look for any discrepancies in branch. I really want to try and help this postmaster, but clearly we cannot say that we will not address what they've confirmed to us, i.e. they have falsified their account. My preference would be to explain this to the postmaster, what the errors to which he refers are, and that if there were affecting his branch, we would be able to identify that. On the false accounting point, could we say something along the lines of, and then some text is inserted. And then if we go to page 3, please. And if we look at your email, that's it. 16th of November, you reply, "Hi, Angela, I do not think this is a genuine request. It has all the hallmarks of Tim McCormack mischief." These freedom of information requests were recently cited in a blog which thanked Mr. McCormack for his work and help in relation to the Horizon system. Did you consider that Mr. McCormack was making mischief?
Well, I think at this point, sort of anonymised requests from A.N. Obedy might drift a little bit closer, but no, again, I think he was motivated to... To be clear, I don't know that this was from Mr. McCormack. I'm saying it struck me it had the hallmarks, I think, reading it from reading back, trying to... the style was similar to the way he wrote, but I don't know that it was him.
Did you think generally he was making mischief?
No, I thought I'd answered that. He was genuinely motivated to pursue, I think in particular, Seema Misra's case. I think that's clear from the feeling you can see in his emails.
Thank you, that can come down. Looking back then, in your dealings with the media, with sub-postmasters, whether directly or indirectly, who were making complaints about Horizon, do you say you acted appropriately at all times?
I certainly tried to. There's a possibility I didn't. All times is quite a long time, and I think we've already seen. I sent one email that, on the banter side of things was, maybe would not have sent or expressed differently.
Thank you.
I'd like to think I always had respect for them because they were dogged and determined.
Did you ever think, as well as being dogged and determined, they might be right?
Yes.
Did you ever express that openly? Hold on, we should all just pause. They might actually have a point here.
Well, I think we by our actions, we were doing that. The scheme sought to do that by investigating, the mediation scheme sought to do that by investigating the individual cases.
That was a genuine attempt to get to the truth, was it, the mediation scheme?
As far as I was concerned, yes.
And the setting up of the second site interim investigation before it, that was a genuine attempt to get to the truth, was it?
As far as I was aware, yes, I came after that had started. So the genesis for it, the origins for it, I'm less familiar with. But everything I saw suggested that's exactly what it was.
Can we look then at your engagement with Second Sight and the complaints that were made before it published its interim report in July 2013? So we're looking at the period here, August 2022 to July 13. And can we start, please, with your witness statement, please, at page 15, paragraph 32.
Sorry, page 50, paragraph 32. Paragraph 32. Thank you. Sorry, 15. Beg your pardon.
I should just read for context or ask you to look at context. Just cast your eye over paragraphs 29, 30 and 31. And with that background, you say in 32...
Sorry, can I just finish? Thanks. Thank you.
With that background, you say in paragraph 32, whilst these tasks gave me some awareness of the controversy surrounding Horizon, I did not get into the detail of Second Sight's work or the underlying complaints, and I was not involved in considering the merits of any of the concerns being examined by Second Sight. I just want to examine the extent of your involvement and the extent of your role at this time. Can we look, please, at poll 00143827? That's tab E80.
80 or 18?
E80.
Thank you.
Are you there?
I'm sorry?
Are you there?
Yeah, yes, I am. Sorry. I'm sorry, I thought I'd said. I beg your pardon.
It's the 1st of November 2012.
Yes, I have that.
An email from you to Mr. Flemington about Horizon immunity proposals. And you outline a proposal from the GFSA in the first 3 bullet points. If we scroll down, you say our draft response and then you set out 3 bullet points. And so you're essentially noting the Post Office's options are do nothing to this proposed immunity, i.e. non-retribution against postmasters for engaging in the scheme. Secondly, propose a no-blame inquiry to be carried out by Second Sight, which would determine whether Horizon was fit for purpose, but would not rule on individual cases, or mediate with the JFSA. And in relation to the latter option, you say this may just add further time and cost with no guarantee of a successful outcome. Yes?
Yes.
If we scroll down, thank you, you say if we go down the inquiry route, it would determine whether Horizon is, quote, fit for purpose by reference to comparable systems. It would not rule on individual cases because of the very wider range of concern which could be submitted, e.g. inadequate training, inadequate support, user error, third-party intervention, Horizon itself. Cases will be chosen by Second Sight, JFSA, sub-postmasters, and not the Post Office. This helps neutralise any suggestion that the Post Office cherry-pick cases or that the processes are whitewashed. The Post Office can still advance its case on the investigation concerns. So just looking at that first page, it seems at this time, November 2012, so within 3 or 4 months of you joining the company, you were engaged in considering how sub-postmasters' concerns would be addressed by or interact with an investigation by Second Sight, weren't you?
Yes, I was. I actually, looking at my statement, I'm sorry, what I think I'm saying in paragraph 32 is I wasn't looking at the detail of the individual complaints. So I'm sorry if that's given the wrong impression.
Why were you conscious of suggestions that the Post Office would cherry-pick cases or whitewash cases considered by Second Sight?
Well, to get a conclusion, you need something. So what my understanding was, they were trying to. The Second Sight had been instructed to get to the bottom, to see whether issues with Horizon could have been the source of unexplained shortfalls in branch accounts. If Post Office leads with its own cases and only its own cases, it's marking its own homework. It's open to challenge being, biased selectively in favour of their own, and hence the exercise was probably unlikely to satisfy the counterparty.
So it would be fair to say, looking at your involvement at this stage, you're addressing process or structural issues rather than an individual case.
I think so. Yes.
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 Okay, we can take that down. Can we look, please, to poll 0018 6090? That's tab E100.
100. I have that, thank you.
We're now in spring 2013. And can you see that at the foot of the page, we scroll down, keep going. The Mr. Swepson, who's a program planner in the IT Separation Program Office, if we scroll down a little further, sends you some spot reviews. Just summarise for us what a spot review was.
My understanding of it, the spot review was Second Sight's work had identified specific instances of, I guess, branch issues at the widest level that had been put to them by the postmasters that they wanted to deep dive. Those issues were sort of crystallised into an issue, with each issue being named a spot review. So I think two are referenced in there. So spot review was an attempt forgive me, I'm fluffing my lines. Spot review was an attempt to analyse in detail a specific allegation raised to Second Sight through this interim early phase, the first phase of their work.
Thank you. And if we scroll up, that having been sent to you by Mr. Swepson, if we just look at the email, you send it on to Gavin Matthews and Andrew Parsons. Yes?
Yes.
You say, I confirm our meeting this Wednesday is at Old Street. I attach the spot reviews we've received and our current draft responses. We'll discuss the responses at the meeting with a view to producing a standalone document which sets out our definitive position on the issue raised in the spot review. The final response may enter the public domain. So we need to ensure it's robust, defensible, and properly protects and advances, or advances, Post Office Limited's case. I look forward to, I suspect that's been should mean briefing you on Wednesday.
Yes. I wondered if it was either briefing or meeting. I'm not sure, but it's a typo for sure.
You told us in your witness statement that you were not involved in considering the merits of any of the cases being examined by Second Sight. And this seems to have you going to a meeting to discuss a draft response.
Yeah, I don't believe I attended that meeting. I don't recall doing it.
But why were you involved, or why were you to be involved in the formulation of the Post Office's responses to spot reviews?
So part of my role, I was quite often the point man, the conduit between external advisors to a project team. In this case, Bond Dickinson were supporting Post Office's review of the spot reviews. And I think the program lead for the Second Sight engagement, I think these are footnoted somewhere in my statement. The project lead was a guy called Simon Baker. I think he had asked for two things. He thought one was to strengthen the language, the form, the content of the spot reviews to better advance Post Office's response to the issues.
To put it as robustly as was possible, is that right?
Quite possibly. I can't remember if that's the words used, but it was of that tenor, yes. And then he also asked, I think, for support from some lawyers on that. Because, and then thirdly, I think he also asked if I could arrange a meeting at their offices, because finding a meeting room was always quite difficult. I have to say I don't particularly recall this, but I've managed to refresh myself from my documents. I think ultimately the meeting was held at 148 Old Street, which was Post Office's office, which is why I think I was able to meet Gavin and Andy when they came. But as I say, I don't recall actually attending the meeting.
Was a defensive approach taken to Post Office's response to the spot reviews?
I suppose you could say defensive. You could also say it was an offensive one. It was a proactive one. They were trying to positively advance their response. You could say it either way. Both are, I think, fair interpretation. It was certainly trying to put their position, our position, as firmly as possible.
To what extent did that undermine the purpose of the Second Sight investigations?
I don't think it did, because Second Sight would review it and consider it and comment as appropriate. But
it wasn't meant to be a litigious or adversarial process, was it?
No, but also I don't think articulating things in a clear and representative manner is necessarily adversarial. I mean, you might like what's been written, but it doesn't mean it's not there for consideration.
Were instructions given to you to take an open and transparent approach with Second Sight, or to take a robust one which properly advanced a case on behalf of the Post Office?
I don't actually recall any instruction either way on that. It was provide information to them that they asked for. At this stage, it certainly was that.
Was there no overarching strategy in the Post Office's response to the initial second site investigation?
I'm not aware of one. Or I don't recall one today, certainly. I don't recall being aware of one at the time either.
You don't remember instructions to the effect that this process has been set up as an alternative to litigation. We should not adopt an adversarial approach in it, a litigious approach, one in which we are lawyered up. We should try and be as open as possible to let the truth filter out.
I'm sorry, there's a lot in there. So what's the question, sorry?
You don't remember any instructions for the purposes of the initial second site review to you or to lawyers involved in the second site initial review, which said that we should adopt an open and transparent approach?
Yeah.
Sorry, yes.
I'm sorry. Yeah. I don't recall an instruction like that. On the litigation point, I think I became aware that these had recently been, similar cases had recently been the subject of litigation, and there was a concern that that was always in the background. So I wouldn't want to say that there wasn't a concern of litigation in there, which is why, and here you can see I've said, look, they need to be defensible and properly protect post office's position. I don't know that that's inconsistent with putting forward information in an open or transparent manner. I think it's just how it's presented.
Can we move on? Poll 307 4005. That's tab E43.
43. I have it. Thank you.
We're now in November 2013. And we can see from this page that you writing to Mr. Parsons saying you attach your markup of the Post Office's response to the Castleton CQ. Can you remind us of what a CQ was?
I think that's a case questionnaire.
And can you remember the functional purpose of a CQ?
I hope so. It was the applicant to the schemes. It was a form in which an applicant to the mediation scheme would articulate their concerns, what they wanted investigated, and why, I believe. Sort of the inbound complaint, as it were.
Anyway, you attached amendments to a proposed reply to the case questionnaire. And in the third paragraph, you say, taking a step back, Mr. Castleton seems to be relitigating his High Court case. I'm going to look at the judgment over my sandwich, but a very quick glance shows that even the £100 and 20 pence scratch card issue was considered. I appreciate that we can't just behind that. He'll say he didn't have the resources to take on the big boy. But I do think we can set out a stall where we portray him as someone who wants £5.2 million after providing inadequate services for all of 9 months. So this was you amending, tweaking the Post Office's response in the initial second site review process.
Yes.
You told us in your witness statement that you weren't involved in considering the merits of individual cases.
I think that's because where I said that first bit, it was in relation to second site's work up to the interim report. This is produced through the mediation scheme, so where I did look at the detail of some cases, but certainly not all of them.
So after July 13, you took a different role, is that right?
After July 13, when the mediation scheme started, I did start looking at some cases in varying depths of detail.
Why was your reaction to Mr. Castleton's CQ to set out a stall rather than investigate the issues that were raised?
In this case, and it literally was, I think, this sole case, I was aware that Mr. Castleton's complaints about branch accounting had been the subject of a high court proceedings and indeed trial and judgment, which the judgment of which underpinned a lot of post offices' operating practices with respect to, as far as I could tell, with respect to postmasters up until the group litigation.
That's interesting. Tell us to what extent the Lee Castleton judgment underpinned a lot of the post office's operating practices until the next judgment 12 years later.
It was a High Court judgment that confirmed an agent's liability to the principal for accounting, and it also made findings that Horizon had been working, quite specifically though, in that case, in that branch.
How did that second point underpin the post office's approach to its operating practices for the following 12 years?
Well, I think it was a strand, but certainly not the only one that gave them confidence in the reliability of the system. Was it
reviewed or referred to a lot within the legal team then?
Yes, it would have been. It was the, as far as I was aware at that time, and I think this certainly from my time, it was the only High Court judgment on this issue, or certainly in the most I'll rephrase that. It was the most recent one. I definitely know that.
And was its importance elevated or emphasised then within Post Office's legal team?
Well, certainly to me it was, yes. Yeah.
And who did that to you? Who said that to you? Or are you saying that you read the judgment and formed that view yourself?
I certainly think it's the latter, but I would have said it was the latter. Yeah, I would have said it's something I formed.
And so what did you take from it? I think you said two things there. Firstly, it confirmed the agent point. Yes?
Yes. I'm trying to think what else I take from it. I haven't read the judgment for a while, but sorry, that was one of them. One of it was an agent's liability to principal, and the second point was that when they looked at the complaints, and this is what I refer to here, the specific complaints that had been raised had been forensically interrogated in the High Court proceedings to the point that a judge was able to say Horizon was working, or the judge felt able to say that.
You say here that you can't hide behind the judgment.
Can you remind me where I say that, sorry?
Third paragraph, taking a step back, Castleton seems to be relitigating his High Court case. Mm-hmm. I appreciate we can't just hide behind that.
Yeah. No, it's as I'm saying, you can't just say, hey, you litigated and go. But I thought it was fair to make comments that some of the issues he had raised had been raised and adjudicated on before. I think what I'm saying there, again, it's a little while, I think what I'm saying there is you can't just be dismissive. You had your day in court, go. But also, I think it's appropriate to recognise the judgment and the proceedings that had taken place.
After you, thank you, that can come down. After you became involved more extensively in the second site work, did you continue in your role as point man for media relations within the legal team?
Yes, I would think so.
Can we look at poll 00145120, please? That's E82. And can we start by looking at the foot of page 1 and onto page 2, please? We'll see an email from you, if we just scroll up, thank you, of the 3rd of July 2013. So this is 4 or 5 days before the publication of the Second Sight interim report. And you are emailing Susan Barty, who's a partner, I think, at Cameron McKenna, yes?
Correct.
And you say, in relation to the Second Sight interim report, we expect to receive the Second Sight interim report late Thursday, early Friday. I'll forward it to you as soon as it's to hand, so you can review it for factual accuracy, as requested by the chairman. And as requested by the chairman, any possible defamation issues, we want as quick a turnaround as possible. Why did the Post Office engage Cameron McKenna to review the Second Sight report for defamation issues?
I think there was a concern. I was working on some direction from
the chairman?
Well, actually, I was getting it sort of second-hand, I think, from the General Counsel.
But you understood it came from the chairman?
I certainly understood it came from the chairman, that there was a concern that they wanted to know that the reporting would be accurate. Sorry, the report would be accurate.
Well, that's a bit different, because you say you can review it for factual accuracy and any possible defamation issues.
Yes.
Was the Post Office considering suing Second Sight for defamation?
It depends what I wasn't aware of that instruction.
Right from the top?
I don't know exactly what from the top was. What I recall was being asked to get a media lawyer to look at it because, and I think defamation was used, so clearly it was used. But I wouldn't go so far as to say because they're thinking of suing. I think we're being asked to look to see what grounds there may or may not be for something like that.
Why would the Post Office be looking at what grounds there would be to bring a defamation claim against Second Sight?
So I think it's reputation management first and foremost. Are untruths going to be said that may damage Post Office? I'm pretty sure, because I did look around this a little bit, I'm pretty sure we gave some advice pretty quickly explaining the challenges that a corporate entity has in pursuing defamation actions, and in particular the need to prove demonstrable loss. But I think that the shorthand was, are untruths going to be said which will cause us harm?
Again, was that part of the open and transparent approach that the Post Office was taking towards Second Sight's work?
I don't think so, no.
So it's 1 o'clock nearly. Might we break now until 2 p.m, please?
Yes, of course.
We're about to change topic.
Fine, that's fine.
Thank you.